Okay, so I want to do a video about, or a series of videos about socialism versus capitalism or the free market, and make the case for the free market. And even though it's not a perfect system, because whenever people are involved, nothing is ever perfect. There's always going to be greed, and frankly, in socialism, there is corruption and greed as well. So I'm gonna talk about that and break it down into different sections because there's a lot of different ground to cover. But I wanted to start out by talking about wages and what's considered fair, and if people should be required, employers should be required to pay a certain amount at least, or if it should just be left up to them. So I actually wanted to base this off of the parable of the let's see, make sure I get this right, the landowner and the laborers in the vineyard. So Jesus is telling a parable comparing it to the kingdom of heaven. And the reason I'm using this is because there are people out there that push for socialism, that sometimes they will use the Bible, whether they believe in the Bible or not, they will use it as trying to make the case for, Jesus would want this, or God would want, the Bible would say that you should pay this much or whatever. And they talk about what's fair versus what's not fair. And certainly there are plenty of scriptures in the Bible that talk about taking care of the poor and helping those in need, etc. So, but I'm just going to talk about, in this video, about what is fair, and, it's basically talking about people agreeing to work for a certain amount. So in this parable, this landowner goes out and hires people in the morning to work for his vineyard, work in his vineyard, and they start out, he offers them a day's wage, and then he goes out in the third hour of the day looking for more people to work in his vineyard because he needs more people. So he asks these people, would you be willing to pay, or would you be willing to accept a day's full wage, even though you're starting later in the day? Would you agree to work for me for this amount of pay? And they agree. And then he does this several more times throughout the day until late in the day, he's looking for people to work for him, and he offers to pay the same amount that he offered the people that started out in the morning. And so basically at the end of the day, when this landowner agrees to pay, or he ends up paying these people who worked for him, basically, let me just make sure I get this right. So when those hired first came, they thought that they would receive more than those who worked later in the day, or started working later in the day. But each of them received the same amount. When they received it, they grumbled at the landowner, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the scorching heat of the day." But the landowner answered and said to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Hopefully I said that right. Take what is yours and go. But I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous?" So the point is, he made an agreement, or a contract. Basically, that's what happens when you agree to work for somebody for a certain amount. You are agreeing to a contract of sorts, where you say, okay, I agree to work for you for this amount. Nobody's making you work for that person. Nobody's making you work for that amount. You can, if you can find a better wage somewhere else, go somewhere else. There are legitimate times where, I think, in my opinion, some people could be paid more than what they're getting paid. But there are other people out there that are willing to pay more, depending on what type of job, or maybe they just are willing to pay more than another person somewhere else. So the point is, no one is forcing someone to work for a certain place. You have the freedom to work wherever you want, and you agree upon a certain wage. And the thing is, the interesting point in this story is, the landowner says, "Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is mine?" So, for example, my husband, he owns a business now, and he does small engine repair and handyman work. So he basically is constantly trying to come up with what he thinks is fair for him and for the people he's doing work for. He wants to be fair to people. So he tries, he will negotiate with them, or he'll offer like, okay, this is what I'm going to charge you. And they can agree or disagree with that. And they could say, okay, I'll hire you, or no, I don't want to hire you. So they will agree or disagree to hire him. Now, sometimes my husband may work for someone who, someone who's a single mom or someone who doesn't make as much money. And he'll say, you know what, this is what I normally charge, but I'll give you a break. I'll charge you less than I normally charge. It's his right to do that. It's his right to decide if he wants to charge what he normally charges, or if he wants to charge less. Some people may say, most people wouldn't, but some people might say, hey, that's not fair. Why are you charging that person less? Well, he's just trying to be, generous and help somebody out who maybe doesn't make as much. But granted, he couldn't do that for everybody and make a living wage for our family. But that's up to him to decide what he wants to do with his business, with his money. So there's a lot of people out there that are like that want to help other people out. And it's their right to charge a certain amount, because people will not hire him if he's going to charge them too much. He has to find that balance of charging enough to where he can make it with his business and, make enough for our family, to provide for our family. So he's got to charge a certain amount, but he can't charge so much that, people aren't going to be willing to hire him. And people won't. If he charges more than somebody else too often, people will not hire him as much. So that's the point, is there's a freedom there where you can, the free market does dictate what you can charge someone or what you can pay someone. Because you know what, if I'm going to work somewhere and I can find a better wage somewhere else, I'm going to choose to go to that other place. And that's my freedom to go somewhere else, because you know what, I don't feel like I'm getting paid enough here. So either I'm going to ask for a raise, or you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I've seen that in a lot of people in my own personal life. I've seen that happen over and over, where either they get a raise because they ask for it and they make the case for why, or they'll just go somewhere else when an opportunity comes up. So this is all about, you make an agreement with somebody where you're going to work, and it's up to that employer to do what they want with their money. If they think it's worth it to pay you more because they feel like you're a really good worker, and maybe you work better than other people. Maybe other people at that job aren't as capable or don't work as hard. So you know what? Just between, you and me as an employer to employee, I really appreciate how hard you work, and you are really valuable to me with how well you do your work, and how capable you are, the skills you have. So I'm going to pay you a little more. And that's between that person and that employer. So, the free market to me does allow for, fair wages based on, no one's forcing someone to work somewhere for a certain wage. You agree to that. And there will be other opportunities. Maybe for a time you can work somewhere where you think, well, I'm not getting paid enough here. And then you try to find another opportunity where you can get paid more somewhere else. Because there's always somewhere, there's always going to be different opportunities over time. Maybe not at that moment, but there's always going to be other opportunities to look for to better your situation. So anyways, that's what I want to talk about, just using an example from the Bible. And it even says, is it not lawful for me to do what I want, what I wish with what is mine? So that, that makes the point that money that somebody earns, as long as they do it lawfully and, aren't using extortion or abusing, someone else with their money, they have a right to do what they want with it. They can pay somebody a certain amount or not. As long as that person agrees to it, as long as they're agreeing and saying, okay, I agree to work for that wage, then there's nothing wrong with that. They're agreeing to it. So I'm going to do more videos like this. I want to talk more about socialism versus the free market. And I'll even probably bring up crony capitalism, because capitalism is different than crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is where the government starts making deals with businesses and, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. And that, I don't agree with that kind of thing. So I'm going to talk about all sorts of things, but this is just the first video wanting to talk about what's fair, quote unquote, and hopefully I can get some good conversation going and just really, I'm really all about common sense. Like I think if we could just talk these things out, I'm one of those people that actually thinks I can convince people unless they're really, some people are so ideologically sold on an idea, they're not willing to, change their mind at all. But I think if we can just talk some common sense, talk these things out, use some facts, use some, just some certain principles, I think, I might be able to convince some people that the free market actually is, while it's not perfect, there's a lot of good things, a lot of good benefits to having that system in our country. So yeah, that's what I had to say. And I just want to encourage people to think about it and really try to compare socialism versus the free market and what the benefits are versus, what some people maybe see as bad. So, okay, that's all I have. So until next time, God bless, and we'll see you next time with another video about capitalism versus socialism.